It exists to explain a structural failure that many professionals experience without ever being able to clearly name. Modern workplaces are not built to reward intelligence, depth, or long-term contribution. They are optimized to reduce uncertainty, control operational risk, and maintain predictable outputs at scale. Intelligence introduces complexity into any system that must make fast decisions. Complexity slows judgment, and systems designed for stability treat that slowdown as a liability rather than an advantage. Organizations therefore do not evaluate people as whole individuals with layered contributions. They evaluate simplified representations of value that can be compared, ranked, and managed by people far removed from the actual work. A signal is not who you are or what you know. A signal is how easily your contribution can be interpreted by someone who does not fully understand your role or technical depth. When your contribution is complex, indirect, or distributed across time, it becomes increasingly difficult to measure. What cannot be measured efficiently is often treated as invisible, regardless of how critical it actually is. Most professionals were taught that consistent performance naturally leads to recognition. That assumption no longer holds inside large organizations designed for scale rather than understanding. Hard work alone does not generate a strong signal in such environments. Quiet competence produces results, but often fails to produce visibility within bureaucratic systems. From the system's perspective, visibility matters more than depth. Visibility reduces ambiguity, and reduced ambiguity lowers perceived organizational risk. This is why loud confidence frequently outperforms silent accuracy. Noise is predictable, repeatable, and easier for systems to classify, compare, and reward. Depth, by contrast, introduces questions that require judgment and attention. Questions slow systems down, and slow systems are perceived as inefficient or risky by management layers. To understand how this works in practice, consider a familiar professional scenario. Imagine a senior engineer who resolves a critical issue deep within a system before it becomes visible to anyone else. The organization continues operating without disruption, deadlines are met, and no escalation occurs. From a managerial perspective, stability is preserved, and the absence of visible problems creates the impression that nothing significant took place. Now compare this with a project manager who introduces a modest interface change or process adjustment. The change is discussed in meetings, documented in presentations, and circulated through email threads and dashboards. This activity creates visible motion inside the organization. It produces artifacts, conversations, and signals that can be easily recognized and rewarded. The system does not reward the quiet prevention of failure. It rewards visible activity that can be observed, categorized, and reported. Not because one contribution is inherently more valuable than the other, but because one is legible to the system, and the other is not. Over time, this creates a growing mismatch between effort and outcome. You invest more energy expecting progress, but receive diminishing returns as recognition fails to materialize. Many professionals respond to this mismatch by working harder and increasing their output. The system does not interpret this as increased value, only as increased load and dependency. As this imbalance continues, internal strain begins to accumulate. You become more relied upon operationally, while becoming less visible strategically. This is how burnout begins in high-performing professionals. Not as emotional weakness, but as a mechanical overload response embedded in the system. Burnout functions like thermal throttling in a machine under sustained pressure. When output exceeds recognition for too long, performance is reduced to prevent catastrophic failure. Your body is not betraying you in this process. It is attempting to preserve long-term functionality under structural strain. Meanwhile, less capable individuals often continue advancing within the organization. This does not happen because they are more skilled or intelligent in absolute terms. They advance because their signals are easier to process and interpret. They present clean, simplified indicators of value that fit neatly into reporting structures. They reduce ambiguity for decision-makers. They appear safe, manageable, and predictable within the system's measurement framework. In large organizations, safety is frequently rewarded more than excellence. This tendency becomes stronger under leadership that prioritizes control and predictability over innovation. Over time, this dynamic produces a structural selection bias. The system selects individuals who fit its measurement tools, not those who generate the deepest value. As this bias compounds, overall decision quality slowly degrades. Short-term legibility replaces long-term effectiveness as the dominant success criterion. At this stage, many professionals misdiagnose the problem. They blame communication style, confidence, or perceived personality flaws. Some internalize the failure and assume they are inadequate. Others focus on toxic colleagues or unfair managers as the root cause. Both explanations miss the underlying mechanism. The issue is not individual behavior, but how value is translated into measurable signals. Your internal value does not map cleanly onto the system's external metrics. Value that cannot be mapped reliably is often discarded during evaluation processes. This is why highly capable employees feel invisible over time. Not because they lack ability, but because their contribution bypasses the system's sensors. Systems cannot reward what they cannot consistently detect. Detection requires simplification, and simplification inevitably removes nuance. The more nuanced your contribution becomes, the harder it is to signal. The harder it is to signal, the easier it is for the system to ignore. If you refuse to simplify your value, you accept reduced visibility. If you oversimplify, you risk becoming interchangeable noise. This is the structural trade-off modern professionals are forced to navigate. And most are never taught that this trade-off exists or how it operates. If this analysis feels uncomfortably familiar, you are not alone. You are experiencing a systemic design problem, not a personal failure. Subscribe to Workplace Strategy Lab if you want clarity instead of reassurance. This channel exists to analyze how systems actually function, not how we wish they worked. In the next video, we will examine how visibility signals are engineered, controlled, and redirected without playing office politics. That is where the patch begins.